I thought maybe we'd start off by just having the elders. I think we've got most of them here. A couple are missing. But if you're an elder, why don't you go ahead and stand up, and we'll make sure people know who you are. So we've got Jeff Forberg, and Dan Breithaupt, and Mark Holloway, Corey Meyer. I don't know, Chuck. Do you? Yeah, Chuck's on sabbatical this year, but yeah, you still count. Chuck Bishop. Ross Hamilton up here at the front, and Wayne Yamamoto there in the back, myself, and then I think we're missing, no we're not, there's Rich Sell. All right, did I miss anybody? Oh, Tim Freimeyer, is he hiding out here? And George, and the numbers keep climbing. Okay, so Tim Freimeyer and George I've missed. All right, so these are guys that I rely on a lot, and you all do, even if you don't always see them up front. What we'd like to do tonight is we're going to first just walk you through some things about the budget and about some giving trends and things. And to do that, I'm going to have Corey Meyer come. Corey is the treasurer on our Elder Council. So Corey, why don't you come and talk to us?
So Tim's given me an hour to go over all this stuff. I am excited. So, you got the slides? Okay, let's bring the first slide up. So, we got up here is our general budget for 2018. Let me get my right paper out here. Maybe I do want to hold this. Yeah, that'll work. I was also promised a calculator up here and all kinds of things, and I'm running out of room. 2018 was a good year. We ended up with a surplus of $78,000. That's about the biggest surplus I can remember. I've been doing this for 15 years, and God provided. We have plans for that, so don't stop giving. We still need the money. So as you can see up there, our budget for 2018, the approved budget was $775,000. We actually spent $743,000. Now, historically, it's pretty normal. The budget committee works and works and works on the budget to get it whittled down to what it should be, and we never spend it all. I don't know what it is, but we never spend it all. And you see, giving was $822,000. To put that in perspective, in 2016, I'm sorry, I'm going to save that for later. Let's see. Let's go to the next slide. So here we've got, what we did with the money. Yeah. So if any of you have been in the chapel, which I'm sure you have, you know it looks wonderful. We got rid of the 70s decoration or carpeting and wood paneling and fixed it. We spent $109,000 there. That and some AV upgrades, badly needed AV upgrades, audio-visual. What allowed that? Now that money did not come out of the general fund. That money comes out of, I like to call the elder slush fund. So when we get large gifts such as from an estate, we set that aside if it's not designated by the person, and we use that for what we call off-budget sheet items. Big ticket items that don't come up at budget time. You know, mid-year we realize, hey, we need to replace a copy machine. We need to replace or fix something. We might go to that fund to pull the money from. This year, we had a very large estate gift, which allowed us to remodel the chapel. Something else that happened this year, we hired full-time children's director. Britt, we were allowed, you know, we had plenty of money to bring him on, which was wonderful. We had a part-time one before, now we have full-time. Something else that started this year was Boost. So we had a big fund drive here last summer. We raised $27,000, almost $27,000. To date, we spent about $16,000. And I'm going to have Larry Hill come up and talk to us about what's going on there.
We got started with Boost. Actually worked on it clear through the summer and got it all set up. We have a great facility. It's an expensive facility, but it's very, very good and very practical for what we need to do. We kind of finally started getting rolling about, I would say right at the end of October. It was about a month later than I'd planned. but the school kind of changed things on us a little bit. Normally kids get report cards just prior to beginning of November, right after Halloween in there sometime. Well, they've moved from trimesters to semesters. So kids are not getting report cards this year until probably a week from Thursday. So the numbers have not exploded yet like I hope they would. We have about 16 or 17 kids right now. If you come down on Mondays, you'd think it is a going concern because almost everybody is there on Mondays. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, we have like 4 kids. But when people are there, it is really vibrant, and it's something that obviously there's a need for this. The Boys and Girls Club is just head over heels about this program that's begun. The problem is we haven't been able to find people to send in information and get signed up. So I'm working on that a little bit with the Boys and Girls Club this next week. We're going to send out a blast email through their I don't know what you call it, their database of kids or families that have kids in the age group we're approaching, which, by the way, is 1st through 5th grade. And we'll see how that works. And then the follow-up is about the time people get report cards. I'm going to spend a week over there after school from about 3 to 5 or so, and I'll just have a table that Dave said I could set up right out in the foyer and try to do a little recruiting that way, too, and see what happens. We've done a lot of thinking about this as to why this hasn't really kind of taken off. The feedback that we've gotten from the parents that have kids there has been phenomenal. And I'll tell you, so the people who we've incorporated into the tutoring so far are absolutely amazing. You could not ask for a better group of full-time teachers to do this. But their hearts and the way they deal with these kids, and some of these kids are really a little challenging, especially for an old high school person to watch what happens just on the way back and forth to the Boys and Girls Club when I'm walking them and how they don't pay attention. And no, wait for me. No, wait for me. They don't pay attention to those things. It's a little different than high school. So it's been a learning experience for me too. I do believe, I firmly believe this, and my daughter, some of you probably know, is a 4th grade teacher. She really believes that about the time report cards hit, parents are going to panic. And when parents panic, we'll probably see registrations coming in. Gary Rude's been helping me a lot down there too, and we've talked about this a lot. I think what's going to happen is the best thing that's going to happen for us as far as recruiting people is word of mouth. And as people start to kind of hear what's happening with their kids in this program, they're going to want to be part of it. But we are also dealing with a clientele, a parent to a certain extent, that is not really good about following through with things that they think need to be done. I have people in the program now that turned in their information right after we did the back-to-school fair at the Boys and Girls Club in July. I was not able to contact them, get interviews done, or get their information in until mid-October. So I think that's what's going to happen. I know that I've had about 40 registration forms at the Boys and Girls Club, and they are all gone. I had to reload it here a couple weeks ago. So I know the forms are being picked up. What I don't know is what's happening after they're picked up. We also have an online presence, but that really hasn't generated much of anything at this stage. I think that's probably not surprising. I think this is more of a pen and paper kind of thing. But I guess that's kind of where we're going. If anybody has any questions, I could certainly entertain them. Oh, that's really good.
Yeah, so we've spent the $16,000, but we are obligated to spend more, mostly on rent through July or August, sometime in there.
A 3-year lease that we had to sign, I got them to give us a 1-year escape clause. So if by August we were determined that we don't feel the program is going to be viable, we would be able to exit at that point. If we decide we're going to push forward with it, then we would need to commit to do that for another 2 years. What's missing in this number up here, the $26,000 that's come in, there was another large gift, about $5,000, that came in after the first of the year. So all of the rent money for the building is covered for year one. We've covered all of our expenses. The thing that we're all praying about, what I ask you to pray about, is that God just gives us some real clarity now as we get through the end of this academic year to determine should we go ahead and keep the program going, and do years 2 and 3. And like Larry was saying, word of mouth is important. I would say if you know families, kids that you think would benefit, by all means, talk it up, encourage them to participate. Yeah.
Something I forgot about too is we've gotten feedback from a lot of the families. These are kids who have needs. They are kids who don't read well, or in some cases at all. Kids that really struggle with math, basic understanding of numbers, literally some of them just writing numbers, counting, that kind of thing. Some of them are really, really bright and really don't need to be there, but they may have background issues with families and whatnot that it's really good that they are. So we're putting a person in front of them who's very loving, very caring. Part of the feedback we've gotten from these families because of the struggles with the kids is we've asked every one of them as we interview, would you be interested in carrying us through this summer? And so our plan is, even after school's out, to connect with the Boys and Girls Club. Most of those kids are there all summer long, and just bring them over. It may be more often than we're doing now. Right now, kids are coming once a week. If we don't have more kids, we'll try expanding it. But I still think we're going to see our numbers increase. We could handle, I said we had about 16 or 17 right now. We could handle 60 easily. And I think you could get up to near 100 kids. We have the personnel to do that. We have the space to do it. But we just need to get them to actually decide they want to do it. Yes? Not directly, no. But we do have connections to those schools because both of the principals attend our church. And so what we have been able to do is put out flyers during like open house and that sort of thing that they can suggest contact persons, or even just tell them, hey, the Boys and Girls Club have a situation here that you might be able to access. And so we've been able to kind of skirt the direct issue a little bit. And they've actually been very, very supportive. It's just more a matter, I think, of the parents that you're dealing with, trying to get them to actually follow through. I do believe when report cards hit, you're going to see a lot of panicked parents. We just picked up one the other day. Exactly, she just gone in and met with a teacher and decided that we need help. And so as soon as they get to that point, I think it will expand yet. But it's been really slow.
The Boys and Girls Club is a real valuable ally in this, though, because they don't have the same issues that we do at the school, but almost all the kids that we would want to be connecting with in the school are by and large involved with the Boys and Girls Club. So that's been a really great strategic partnership there.
I got ahead of myself a little bit there. They were supposed to be after this next slide. Pull that next slide up, please. Account balances. So you can see there, general fund. So general fund is church operations. Think of it as a bank account. We've got $168,000 sitting in that account. That's to cover payrolls, whatever it might be. Emergency fund, we set aside $60,000 to cover emergencies. If you all stop giving one Sunday, we can cover it. We're good. Special sinking funds. Those are two different things. We have special funds and we have sinking funds. A special fund is a ministry's bank account. Now, they don't have their separate bank account, but it's kind of a bucket we put their money into, and they're free to use that money on their ministry. Sinking funds are something we started a number of years ago to start addressing some of the big ticket items we've got coming up. We had the heat pumps go out a number of years ago, and we didn't have any money saved for that. Thought, well, maybe we should start doing some of this stuff. So every month, we take out of the general fund and put into this sinking fund a certain sum of money to cover these things that we know are going to be an issue in the future. So a couple of those things, a van. We put money away every month for a new van for the youth or for anybody in the church, that any ministry might use it. We've got siding, painting, church van, computers, lawnmower. That's not a very big one. But in total, right now, we've got about $36,000 put away for those future items. We need about 75. So 5 to 6 years, we'll have that fully funded. The biggest one, well, would be the church van fund, I guess. Another heat pump and more upgrades for in here. Next slide is boost. We're going to skip that one because we already did it. I didn't do it. I can't take credit, sorry. This is giving trends from the very beginning, January 2016, through January 2019. So the big ups and downs, that's 1 week, okay? The solid line, that's the trend we're seeing. So in 2016, total giving was just under $700,000. For 2018, total giving was $823,000. It's a 17.5% increase in 2 years. And I'll tell you, most of that increase came in the last year. It wasn't as much of an increase from 16 to 17 as from 17 to 18. So we've really seen an increase, which makes sense because our numbers have gone up. I mean, Tim's going to talk about that soon. You'll see that graph too, right?
What's that one spike in the year?
Yeah. Yeah. The other big ones are Wayne's giving. You know, when he opens up his wallet finally and some of that pours out into us. Yeah. Let's go to the next slide. This will be the budget. So 2019 budget. We have budgeted, the finance committee. So give you a little background if we have time. Yeah, I've got time. Do I have time? I got time. So the finance committee, along with Jenny, get together in the fall. Actually, before that, Jenny sends out, what do you call them, requests to all the ministries, and they tell us what they want. And we get us in a finance committee, and we say no, 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 and no, and send it back and say, redo it. So they redo it, and they come back, and we put a proposal together, take it to the elders, and they say yay or nay, ask some questions, and we set a budget. This year, we're at $858,000. That is an increase, do I have that number? 11% increase over last year. Now, if you remember what the giving was, it wasn't that much. Giving was only giving was $823,000. So how have we budgeted more than we even brought in last year? Well, if you also remember, we don't spend what we budget. So if you figure we hold the same percentage of what we spend to that budget, we will spend $824,000, which is right in line with what we brought in this year, and we expect to bring in more next year. So we're not worried about the increase. It's pretty typical. Yes.
And just so you know how this works at a staff level in terms of our spending, every month Jenny turns out a sheet that shows us where we're at year to date with our spending, and one of the figures on there shows budget spent for every line item. I run through that with staff, and the number I'm looking at is what percentage of your budget have you spent year to date? So if we're 20% of the way through the year, I'd like to not see any line item over 20% of what they have budgeted for the year. If they are, now sometimes that's legitimate. Sunday school curriculum usually spends about 100% of their budget within the first month or two of the year, but that's because they buy the full year's curriculum at one time. But we try to be really aware as a staff that we are, you know, our burn rate, if you will, as we move through the year is matching what we had budgeted. And if something is getting out of hand, we're trying to catch that before we get too far ahead of ourselves. And then what people normally do in their budgets is they think generous, and when you actually get right down to it, you oftentimes find that this activity or that activity didn't cost as much as you thought it might. So that's why we normally come in below the number that we budgeted. But no one's guaranteed their money. If we get partway through the year and the giving's not keeping up, then we just tell people to pull in the reins. You know, all this budget is it tells us here is the pie by faith that we believe we're going to have to work with this year, and your line item is your slice of that pie. But you can't have a slice of pie that isn't there. So we're always watching to be sure that we're staying in line with what the Lord's actually bringing in.
And the finance committee gets together every month too and looks at those numbers so we can tighten up the reins if we need to. So a couple of final points here. I want to point out the GOC budget. So 2018, we budgeted 81,000. 2019, we budgeted 97,000. We're budgeting over 11% of our budget to go to missions. We always have tried to keep it above 10%. Some years we haven't, some years we have. Last 2 years we have. This is a number that shocked me when I looked at it at our finance meeting. So there's more than just the general fund money that comes in the door, right? The general fund is only the giving that's given to general church expenses. There's also giving towards special funds, special ministries. In 2018, we had $1 million spent on ministry at DCC. That's incredible. And 88% of our budget goes towards ministry. How are we able to do that? We don't have any debt, which is huge. It allows us to do so much more than churches that are burdened, with these huge debt payments. So I'm very thankful for that. That's just a shot at you guys. So when we see our options for building, we go a certain direction, right? I think that's all I got.
We'll have some time for questions at the end, too. So if there's some specific things you'd like to know. A lot of you, I think, are probably wondering about the 858,002, and you're probably concerned about that, too. Corey has guaranteed that he will cover the 2 at the end of the year, so whatever happens. I don't know why we get such an exact number there, but we do. All right. Here, Corey, I'm going to give you back some of your paper. There you go. So let's talk about another trend chart we have besides the money chart, and that is the people chart, what attendance looks like. And so here we have January 3rd, 2016. That Sunday morning, there were 363 people. Last Sunday, January 20th, there were 586 between the 2 services. You see a couple big drops there. That was Christmas Day, a snow day, and the church picnic. And then you've got some big spikes there. That's usually Christmas and Easter that you see spike. But you can see what the overall trend is. Right now, our weekly average is hovering right around 550 per week. So what is our capacity that we can handle here on a Sunday morning? All right, that's what the numbers look like for attendance, what our capacities look like. Our auditorium, when it is fully set up like this, all the chairs are set out, and if you had somebody sitting in every one of those seats, can accommodate 381 people. Now, people that track things in churches, how it works, when does a building feel full, will tell you that a building feels full when you reach 80% of your capacity. That's the point where people walk in and say, oh, well, there's no room here. There's no space to sit. So 381 seats, 80% of that would be 304, which would be kind of a realistic functional capacity. And if you're a church that has more than one service, an architect we've worked with, they said that what they find is that churches with 2 services, their early service, which is usually more lightly attended, it maxes out around 60% of capacity. So if you use that number, then that's 229, which means between those 2 services, there's really an effective seating of about 533 people. I don't know if you're recalling the number I just showed you on the last slide, but last Sunday we were at, come back here, whoops. Yeah, 586. So you can see the issue coming up there. Parking is the other issue for us. We have 234 stalls. If we fill every stall out there, that includes all the handicap stalls. And we did some traffic studies here about a year ago, and we found that on average, there are 1.6 people per car, which means that some of you are only half here. But that means that effectively, those 234 stalls have capacity for 375 people. If you put this all together, last Sunday, our first service, we had 226 people there. Using that 60% rule, we were right at 100% of capacity. Second service, we had 360, which means we are at 118% of capacity. So, brings up the question, what do we do? We are starting to feel really full. One of the things I'm grateful for is we have a lot of people that are coming to the first service, and that is tremendously helpful, that there are a lot of people coming to that first service. Let me give you just an overview of our property, because maybe you've never figured out exactly how much property we have here. Here's an aerial. Thank you to Greg Husted and his drone. We now have a nice aerial view. And the part that is highlighted in red, this right here is our actual property. And right here is the upper gravel lot, which we affectionately call adventure parking. Back here, this is the mound system for the septic for the facility. So one area that we've not developed yet is this part of the field here. This could be turned into more parking and an area about equal to that upper lot. There is not a whole lot of other property in our plot right now that's available. There is a spot right here. This would be the current playground, and I'll show you some more details about that in a minute. And then much of this around here is greenbelt. There's really nothing we can do with this. The only open property on our side of Scrum-Dungeness Way is this lot right across Eberly from us. And we have sent a letter to the people that own it. They live in California, just saying, hey, if you guys are ever interested, we might be interested. They haven't written back. So that may tell us something, that right now they're not ready yet to consider selling that. But other than that, we are a bit landlocked. So, what are options if we were to accommodate more people on a Sunday morning? What we've tried to do as an elder council in thinking through this is look at everything from the really simple do nothing to the most extravagant that we could think of, and then say what are all the options in between. So the most simple thing that we could do would be nothing. We don't change anything. We just keep our service structure the way it is, we leave our buildings the way they are, and we just leave it as is. There are some definite pros to that. One, it means we don't disrupt any of our current ministries. Definitely means we don't incur any debt. We don't add any stress to our current staff and volunteers. They just keep doing what they're doing. It does have its cons. It means that we're forced to live with some of the limitations we have, one of the big limitations being that really small entryway out there. If you ever see what happens on a Sunday morning, it is just a zoo trying to get through there. And people involved in various ministries, we've got those little tables out there. There is a regular dogfight for who gets space on those tables, and we limit. We won't let more than about 2 to 3 tables out there because there's just no room. So that's one of the limitations we have to live with. We've also got some real limitations in our kitchen back here, and when we're serving large groups, that has some problems. It does mean that there is a stagnation in our growth, and if one of the things we want to encourage people to do is if you have a neighbor that you have been witnessing to, you've built a relationship with, I think a great way to take the conversation to the next level is just to invite them to come to church with you. But you're not going to do that if you don't feel there isn't any place for them to sit down. So at some point, if you say we're not going to do anything, and if we continue to feel the growth that we've been feeling, we're just going to max there, and there won't be room for new people to come. Something that people often bring up when we talk about options is they say, well, how about if we planted another church? Which sounds really good. You know, plant another church, expand the ministry that way. The problem is, realistically, for a church plant to work, you generally need 2 things to be true. You need to have enough geographical distance, and you need to have enough style distance to justify people going to one congregation versus the other. If you just try to mirror what you have, one, you can't mirror it because part of what you are is just the people that are involved. And it's not really an issue that there aren't enough seats in pews in the county. There are plenty of churches around that have room for people. So simply adding another new church plant to the community doesn't necessarily solve anything right here. So that has been one that we just feel doesn't really offer much realistic help for what we're going through. Another thing on the upper end of what we could do, probably the highest end, would be what if we just sold everything here and went and bought a new campus and built everything new? That would have some pros to it for sure. You would get the buildings just the way you wanted it. You could expand. We could move in closer to town, which would make us more accessible to people. That's all well and good. The big con to it is you're probably looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of $10 million. And as Corey said, one of the things that has allowed us to do the ministry that we do is we don't have any debt. And I think as leadership, we are very reluctant to put ourselves into a position where we're saddling not just this congregation right now, but this congregation for the next 30 years with the kind of debt payment it would take to cover that kind of property. I'll probably talk about this again some more later, but one of the things I'm always aware of is churches go through cycles. And right now we are in a growth cycle. It's exciting. That doesn't mean that that trend line going like this is going to go like that forever. You know, things change. And so to take on a huge amount of debt on an assumption that 20 years from now it's going to look just like it does right now, at least for me personally, I feel like I'm kind of running ahead of God on that one. So we don't have too much heat for this idea of going out and buying a whole new campus unless one of you is Bill Gates' nephew and you just like to write the check, in which case, please talk to me right after the meeting. Another option would be a remote campus. This is done a lot in urban areas where churches will have a main campus and then they will set up, maybe they rent more space somewhere in a school or commercial building, and they will use a remote feed of their service. They televise it basically with a closed circuit type setup. And there are some pros to that. It's a whole lot cheaper than building something. It would take advantage of some of the synergy of DCC ministries, but I'm not sure that that kind of approach works in Clallam County. We're not the big urban area. I don't think you're going to find a lot of people that would like to go down to an empty space at QFC and watch TV for their Sunday morning church. So that one just doesn't feel like a realistic, a really beneficial way for us to try and solve the problem. The other thing is those kinds of remote campuses also require additional staff expenses because you normally need a campus pastor for those remote campuses. So there's a whole nother layer of expense that goes along with that sort of approach. Okay, the other one would be to do some kind of new building on our existing campus. Is there something we could do here that would let us get more room, especially on a Sunday morning, accommodate more people, especially in the auditorium? And we've spent some time with an architect, a group out of Edmonds that does a lot of church architecture, TGB Architects. Kind of interesting, one of the guys who's the principal of TGB has been super involved for years in Ukraine. And when I was in Ukraine this last summer, I was involved with some of the orphanages that he's been involved with. And we didn't realize that till I got over there that our architect has been there as well. What we asked them to do was to take our current facility and said, okay, if we were to do the maximum that we could do on this footprint, what would it look like? How much could we do? It means you not only can, how much building can you put here, but to have enough parking to accommodate the building you put here. So we worked through a plan with them. We also went and met with the county because it's one thing for us to think what we think we can do here. Will the county sign off on it? So we went through the process with the county to see how much they would approve. We were grateful. They had no problems with the plan that we presented. So let me just show you a maximum build-out plan on this property, what that would look like. The stuff you see in dark here would be additions. This would be a new building sitting right back here on what's currently the playground. There would be an extension on the lobby out here to make that quite a bit bigger. And there is a unified storage building. We currently have a village of little huts, sheds, portable buildings. You know, it takes a village, but that's not quite what we had in mind. So it would be nice to build one unified, good, clean storage building. And then along with that, up here, this shows the parking area being fully built out, including that grass area that we have right now, all of that being turned into parking. What that would do is it would increase, let's see, I've got some more pictures here for you. Here's what that looks like on the inside of the auditorium. What this does is we would vacate all of the Sunday school rooms in here, okay? So we'd get rid of the Sunday school rooms and we would knock this wall out. There's also some space behind the stage here. We would push all of this to the back wall to open up more seating. And that would allow us to get about 622 seats into this auditorium. If you're going to take these Sunday school rooms away, then you've got to add them somewhere else. And so that would be the new building that would go out there. It would be a 2-story building. And if you see on this image right here, it's showing you what the first floor of that building would look like. There's a large meeting room. That room is actually a little bit bigger than our current chapel, but it's configured better. It's a little bit wider, not such a long, narrow building. So it would give us a nice little banquet room type facility. There also would be a commercial grade kitchen to go along with that. And then you've got several meeting rooms around here. The architect envisioned this as being kind of an adult education floor, but you could really do anything you wanted to with it. The second story would look like that. There is another kind of larger meeting room if you're doing like children's church, something like that. And then you have a series of kids' classrooms around here. And of course, you got your restrooms and things. This would have an elevator in it. And that would allow us to both expand our Sunday school rooms as well as expand the amount of seating in this building. The pros, of course, it allows us to accomplish a lot of our goals for more seating, more education space, better banquet space, better kitchen space. The downside to that is about $3 million. Which brings us back to the former problem. None of us are very excited about launching into something that carries huge amounts of debt. That said, we understand that sometimes God puts people in a congregation that he's blessed in such a way that they could say, hey, we would like to underwrite a major part of that, and if that person came forward, that would certainly change the equation for us. But what we know right now, what the Lord's put in front of us, this one doesn't seem real desirable just from the perspective of the amount of debt it would take. The next thing we could do is a phased build. And by that, in doing that master plan, we took a look at how could we phase into that. What are pieces that we could do immediately that would help us and then would open the door that if down the road we decide to do more, we're not unbuilding anything that we've built, right? We can phase into it. And so the phasing that we've looked at would be a phase 1, which would be an auditorium lobby expansion, doing that out there. That would take a huge amount of pressure off for us if we could finally expand that entryway. Here's the kicker to expanding that entryway, and it's the reason we've got stuck on this for years. As soon as we expand the footprint of this building, right now we've been grandfathered in because of the age of the building, and if you study the ceiling, there are no sprinklers in here. As soon as we expand the footprint, we have to sprinkle this building. And the estimates run anywhere from $160,000 to $250,000 for sprinklers. I proposed that as you come in with your bulletin, we give everyone a spray bottle. It's a zone-specific intelligence system. If you see flames, shoot them. The county has not agreed with my plan. And so that's always been the thing that has stopped us, is just, you hate to spend that kind of money before you even build anything out there in the lobby. I think we finally have reached a point, though, of saying it doesn't matter what we do, this is always the speed bump we run into. And once we deal with it, we don't have to deal with it again. Then we can expand that way, we can expand this way, we can do other things in this building, and that's just out of the way. And so I think if we're going to do anything with this building, we just have to bite the bullet and say, we've got to deal with the sprinkler. It's not a bad thing. I mean, it's a good thing to have sprinklers in this building with lots of people. So from a safety point of view, it's all good. It's just the sticker shock of what it costs to put that in to begin with. So if we got that done, and if we did the lobby expansion, it would mean some more paving work outside, some landscaping work. We figured that would cost about $197,000, $200,000 to get through that. And then we would like to get the storage building built. That comes in, I think, about $184,000 by the time grading and construction, everything is done. And then you would have the education building would be a phase 3. The thing with expanding this auditorium, if you want to knock this wall out, you reach a point with phases where then it becomes all or nothing. You can build the entryway and stop right there, and you're not obligated to do anything more. You can build the storage building and stop there. But once you knock this wall out, then you have to make room for those rooms, and that means you have to build another building to accommodate it. So that's the phase that you kind of wait and see and go, okay, Lord, should we take that big step? Because at that point, you are going to take a big step forward if you do it. We like this idea of pay-as-you-go because it avoids excessive debt. Prioritizing these phases means we minimize the amount of disruption to our ministries. And getting the expansion done out there in the entryway sooner than later probably makes sense because building costs don't go down over time. There are some other things we can do that are not that involved. One is to maximize our current seating and look at ways we can use the chapel for overflow. There are right now on the wings here, there are some short aisles you'll see that come down into the seats there. We can eliminate those aisles and pick up about 30 more seats at zero cost. We already own enough chairs to do that. We also are looking at what it would take to take the AV booth back there and move it up and out of this building, actually knock a hole in the back wall and move that out of there. If you talk to sound guys, they'll say that's a really bad idea because then you can't hear what's happening with sound. The only reason we think it will work is our soundboard will let us control it with an iPad. And we know guys that are doing this so that your sound people can actually sit in the congregation, hear what's going on, and they can control the sound. If we could do that and move that out of the way, we could probably add another 50 to 75 seats. So with those couple minor, relatively minor things, we could add about another 100 seats to this auditorium without any more extravagant building. There's also some things we would like to investigate with chapel overflow. One of those would be we already have got a good TV system set up now, our video system. It would not be a big step for us to add a closed circuit capability over to the chapel. Now, the question is, how many people would be willing to sit in the chapel and watch an overflow service like that? You're going to have to tell us, you know. It works in concept. Does it work in reality? Dale. Would you be able to tell if we're asleep over there? Dale, I can tell you're asleep right now. So for those that would like a quieter environment, you know, we could keep the sound off completely over there. Another option would be to go back and do something like we were doing with our vintage service, where people that would love to do like just hymns, we could do those over in that building. They would do a live music package there, and then they would basically watch the sermon. We'd use the closed circuit to put the sermon over there. Again, the question is, would those people be satisfied with that? But it is an option, and it would be a fairly minimal expense to make that available. Something else that we could do is we could do an evening service. And I think that there are some really good gains could come out of that. There, I think, are a group of people, and maybe especially some younger family people that are working jobs where they have to work Sunday mornings, or they're working late Saturdays and getting up Sundays tough, and they would probably come to a Sunday evening service. There'd probably be some Sunday morning people that would be willing to come to a Sunday evening service. That gives us a lot more, we free up a lot more space by going to that third service. The downside to that is what it does to, especially your volunteers. Staff feel it for sure, you know, so yes, I don't mind preaching a third time, that's fine. The bigger issue is what does it do to your musicians, your ushers, all those other ancillary people involved. And musicians probably feel the brunt of that the most. You might do an evening service that was more youth-oriented. Since a lot of you, once you get past a certain age, you don't like driving at night, that's probably not going to be the right service for you, but we might aim toward a younger crowd with that evening service. But again, you've got to have the musicians to make it happen. And it may be like the Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. But while you're building it, you still have to cover those bases. And so that is probably the biggest hurdle in that one is, could we do this and not stretch our people so thin that, we just overwhelm them? We've talked about the possibility of a Saturday night service. That one does become a real stress on staff because it pretty much means you don't have a day off anymore. By Saturday afternoon, you're gearing up for Saturday night, and then you're straight into Sunday. For me personally, my own sanity, Sunday is great. I will do services all day Sunday, but... So, yeah, and I think for your music teams, you'd have the same issue because, again, you're asking them to come out Saturday night and back again Sunday morning. Dave? If we were to do an evening service, I don't think we would try and do any children's ministries. Kids that come would just stay in the service with the adults because that would be a huge burnout to start asking all of your children's workers to come back and run a full program in the evening again. Yeah. And so it says Q&A time. Go ahead. Yeah, it's funny. If you look back there's a yellow sign that says what our maximum occupancy is, and it just seems nuts to me. What does that say? It's like 800? Can you imagine 800 people in this building? But that is our rating in here. We do have lots of exit in this building. We've got exits here, here. Every Sunday school room has an external exit back there. But you're right. When it happens, you've got to have ushers and other people that are getting people to move out those other doors. Yeah. Oh, Burnett's got a mic here if somebody... Yeah. There's no reason not to. It's just kind of people patterns. It tends not to. The bulk of people that show up tend to show up to that second service. And, of course, if you can get more people to go to the first service, that's great. Yeah, and we actually did that a few weeks ago, and I saw several people do that, and it was wonderful. And so the more people that come to that first service, the more pressure it takes off the second service.
There's no reason it can't go to 80%.
No, there's no reason not to. It's just that normally it doesn't.
Immediate things?
Yeah, I think that is obviously the simplest first step. We also we were talking about that this morning. I think back in the day, we actually put the rows a little bit tighter together. And so we could do that. You just scrunch up a couple inches each row, and suddenly you've got another row of seats you can put in. So you're talking basically... Yeah, the parking is something, all of you that are willing to take that extra 0.4 person in your car so we get 2 people per car, that would be great if we can move from 1.6. Carpooling would be a wonderful thing because that is, and unfortunately, there's just not a lot of options we have out there. We just don't have other property unless we can buy that lot, which so far hasn't been a possibility. We've talked about asking the lavender farm across the street if we could use that for parking. The downside then, though, is you have a lot of pedestrians dodging back and forth across Squim Dungeness Way, which might thin out some of the numbers, but we might have to have you a test. You have to, you can sprint at a certain speed. We'll let you park over there. One of the things we've talked about is, too, with the back lot, we know that that's a long walk when you're out there. And we've talked about buying one of those little, like a 3-4-seater golf cart things and just running it as a shuttle on Sunday morning. So people that aren't able to make the long walk wouldn't feel like they can't park out there, that we could pick them up. And again, that's a pretty inexpensive way to get a lot more use out of that parking area. One of the challenges when you talk about the music teams, there are some things that you can recruit people off the street, and we'll show you how to do a Sunday school lesson. Recruiting people and showing them quickly how to play an instrument like they've had 20 years of practice, that's a little different, a little harder to come up with. So that's where, to find the people that would really be able to staff that well, that's something we've really talked to God about. Like, where are those people? How do we do that, if we even do it?
Separate cost.
There is a separate cost, and I've got it, but not on me. I don't recall. Do any of you guys recall? $5 a foot is the paving cost. So whatever square footage that works out to. Molly, I appreciate what you're saying about, can we do a show of hands? Something we're going to do is we have some paper surveys, but what we'd rather you do is we have this same survey form online. And I'll be sending this out either tonight or tomorrow morning, that if you're on DC Connect, you can click on it and respond online. The reason that will help us is when you respond to the survey that way, it auto-compiles itself. If you do it on paper, then the secretaries in the office have to hand compile all the data. If you don't do DC Connect, if you don't do the internet, that causes you to break out in hives. We don't want to cause you any distress. We have paper copies. Jeff will have it. Jeff is here in the bright shirt. There's Jeff. And so he will have those surveys. And one of those questions does have to do with, would you be willing to use an overflow space like the chapel? Because that's a great question. That's a great question, and we don't have the answer right now. Yeah. Yes. Oh, right here, Ben.
Tim, just trying to get people in, and I was an usher this morning, and whenever I am an usher, I think it'd be great if you could get to whoever's doing announcements to try to get people to move in, because there's always 4 to 6 seats, especially in the middle, and people come in and, you know, they kind of reject trying to move in. If you could, whoever's doing the announcements could say, hey, could everybody, you know, maybe during the greeting time, and then that would leave seats on the end, because a lot of times it's hard to get those people. And we find seats for them eventually, but if that's an option, that would be great.
It's an option. I'll tell you the reality of it, because I've been up front and made those announcements. And you say, could y'all move to the center? You know who you are. So if everybody would, that would be great. And we're not against making the announcement, but it is an unfortunate reality that most people, the reason they showed up early and got the end seat was because they wanted the end seat and they're not going to give it up. It's just, you know, they'll fight the man that takes it. Yeah, I think right up here I got one first, and I'll get back to you. Christina?
With all the people growth, have the elders talked about the infrastructure of incorporating all those people into our fellowship?
Conversation happens all the time between elders and staff. You know, how do we get these people that are coming really integrated into the body? And that's a whole nother discussion of how do you know, integrate them in. But yeah, it's a big factor. How do you do that?
So one of the reasons that we have little debt now is that the building that we're in at the moment was built through volunteer labor, which is how we got out of debt so quickly to start with. So a lot of us have been around to see that process, and I'm assuming that the majority of the numbers now are based on having it built and not necessarily insourcing portions of this. Have we looked at the numbers? What is the ratio to material cost versus labor? And I mean, have we done a realistic, you know, outcry or call to service for those within the? Yeah.
Well, we haven't done a very concerted request for people to pitch in that way, because we haven't yet presented a plan to anyone to even respond to. One of the things we've discovered, though, back when this building was built, in fact, we were just talking about it, I think, Chuck, you and I were talking about it, how many of the guys in the church were active contractors. We had a whole fleet of young guys that were building houses, and this is what they did. We don't have that same fleet of people, not in the numbers we did. In fact, when you talk to guys in the building trades, everybody's saying, you know, we can't find workers, we can't find workers. And, of course, this congregation, a lot of us are also 30 years older than when this building was built. So some people that felt great about, you know, shoveling concrete and swinging hammers then are a little less disposed to do that now. So yeah, the more volunteer labor we get, the better off we are. But I think if we're going to look at a projected cost, we kind of need to say, well, we don't want to make an assumption that we're going to get X amount of volunteer labor, get halfway in the project, realize we don't, and then surprise everybody, go, oh, hey, guess what? We're about $100,000 off because we thought we'd have more volunteers. I think I'd rather give you a number that says this guarantees we get it built, and if we get a lot of volunteers, we can trim that down faster, farther. That is ideal. But we feel a little short right now on some of the manpower front, and maybe I'm wrong about that. We can't. I'll tell you one place we did have a little sample of this. Over the summer, we were doing all the remodeling in the chapel, And we put out several calls for people to come down and help with painting and doing various things over there. And we ended up hiring about a third of it because we couldn't get anyone to come down and do those volunteer jobs. So that was a little surprising to us because some of that wasn't real complex stuff. But I also understand lots of times you need to do the work during the day when people have other jobs. You know, they're there at their jobs. But obviously, the more we get, yeah, we're totally open to using volunteer labor.
So my parents are having a cabin be built, and when they got the loan for it, my mom said, you know, oh, well, my husband can be doing this and this and this in there. And the loan lady said, well, no, if you're hiring a contractor, they're doing it. You can't be in there doing the work. So if we have to get a loan for something, are we able to have volunteers do it, or does it all have to be contracted out?
Depends on the contractor.
Okay.
Yeah. Carlene.
Last time when this building was built, there was a bond. I don't know if you've discussed that, and I'm not financially astute in those kinds of things, so I don't know how that would work, but I remember that a lot of us did buy bonds.
Yeah, a bond program would be great. Basically, we borrow the money from ourselves and pay ourselves back. You just realize you still have borrowed money from somebody. You may not borrow it from the bank, but you borrowed it from somebody, and you do have to pay that somebody back. Now, sometimes people, as part of bond campaigns, will say, we're going to, if we pass away before this is paid back, we're just going to write off the balance as part of our estate plan. And, but you kind of hate to bank on people not sticking around. It's awkward, to say the least. Britt can probably address that better. I would say the real driver for us has been the crowding in the main auditorium, but Britt, maybe you want to talk about kids ministries.
Well, just quickly, I mean, the two end rooms are great. The two middle rooms are small, and so we've got half of our groups working in good spaces and half working in very constricted spaces. Would love to see that change at some point, but that's just kind of where we're at today. So.
Yeah, I was just wondering, has the church's insurance agent come back with any estimates on savings once you put the fire protection system into the building as to lessen the sting slightly?
No, we haven't asked that question. There would be some savings. Fortunately, Church Mutual is pretty reasonable on their rates. So I'm sure it would save us some, but it would take us several years to realize and saved insurance would be spent on the sprinkler system. Yeah. Bob?
Yeah, just a small point, but to save money on insurance for the sprinklers, you're going to spend it in another way. I manage several big shopping centers. We have to have those sprinkler systems tested every year, and it's expensive. So whatever you save on the insurance, you're going to spend on the fire department.
Just a thought, not that you're going to gain anything over an evening service in numbers of people, but have you thought about tweaking the times a little bit?
We could tweak the times. What would make a bigger difference for us would be if we actually did a third morning service. The problem is trying to get 3 full services in before noon means you've got either one service that starts really early, and that's not many people want to come to that really early service. Now, SCC, what they do, you see their services and it looks like they have a service per hour. That's actually not true. Their services are about an hour and 15 minutes, but the way they do it is because they have 2 meeting spaces, and we could kind of do this. We've got the chapel. Their first service begins in their main building, and as it is wrapping up, the second service has already started in the other building. And so Scott, who's preaching, he just goes straight to the service and gets there just in time to preach. He's preaching there as the third service is starting up in the other building now, and he comes straight back. So he basically just preaches 3 sermons straight in a row with no breaks in between. And that's how they do it. But yeah, that sounds like burnout in my book. For me, I'm not that good. And they have more parking. Yeah, that's the other problem. When you overlap them like that, you've got to get all those cars in. And we kind of need everybody to leave to get the next batch of cars in. Yeah. Corey, do you have somebody back there?
Okay. When you count the numbers of both services, and I love to have the kids in the big room with the adults, keeping the family together for worship. I understand that that can be really important. However, if the kids went to their own Sunday school or whatever, would that open up chairs for the adults in either of the service?
Yeah. Yeah, it would. I mean, if we could take some little bottoms out of the equation earlier in the service, that opens up more adult seating. You're right, there is a bit of a philosophical thing there that we like, and we think it's important having our kids be with their families as part of church. And so that's probably something that would be kind of optional last resort for us, if there's a way we can avoid doing it. Let me show you, and we can take some more questions, but I'll just talk you through kind of our preferences, proposals here. Again, we really want to stay with as little debt as we can. It's what lets us do ministry the way we do it. If you look at our staffing and missions compared to total budget, we are heavy on staffing and missions compared to kind of a national average. One of the reasons that works for us is because we don't have any debt. And frankly, I would much rather spend the money on people and ministry than I would on bricks and mortar if we have a choice. The other thing is we believe we can maximize seating here, at least 100 seats, by making some of these tweaks we're talking about. That has very minimal cost. We'd like to experiment with the chapel, and the feedback you give us on that survey is going to help us determine if it's worth trying to do something over there by way of an overflow or an alternate service kind of format. And we really need to hear from you about that. It's hard to say. People will say, oh yeah, I'd go, and then when you actually do it, it's like, well, I didn't mean actually go. So consider the evening service. As David said, that's not without its problems, and it may not be a solution, but it's something we're willing to look at, and it doesn't require any cost building-wise, but it does have all those issues about the stress on your volunteers. We think we need to go ahead and do the sprinkling in the auditorium, which then allows us to expand the entryway and also expand our parking area out there. And that includes modifying rooms 5 and 6. These two rooms right here, room 6, the closest to the stage, is quite small. And what Pastor Britt would like to do is put a divider in there that you can open that up and either divide the rooms or make one larger room. That would be very helpful for our children's ministries. And we'd like to upgrade this kitchen. We won't get any more square footage out of it, but if we at least upgraded it to commercial ranges and made it more efficient, more effective, that would help a lot. And we'd like to get that unified storage building built. That would let us take some junk out of other places, free up some space. The neighbors, I'm sure, would not be unhappy if we got rid of our little village of stuff out there. So we'd like to do that. So that's the direction the elders are leaning at this point as far as what we'd like to do. What we're not feeling inclined to do is jump into a massive building project. But understanding there are pros and cons to all these things. Any other questions? Right. The maximized seating, the experiment, the chapel, you're probably looking at a matter of a few $1,000s, $2,000 to $5,000 to get the video stuff all set up to make that work well. So that's a kind of a non-issue. The evening service, again, is a personnel issue, not a cost issue. So you could really do the first 3 things there without spending really any money. You don't start talking money till you get down to sprinkling the auditorium, and there's no point doing the auditorium if you're not going to expand the entryway. And we figured the cost for expanding the entryway I think we came up with about $200,000 for the lobby expansion. And then you've got the sprinkling on top of that, isn't it? Yeah. So you're looking at about a $300,000, $400,000 project to sprinkle this and to expand the entryway and do the modifications here in room 5 and 6. That's a little chunk. Yeah, Carolyn? The education building comes in around $3 million. The storage building was at $184,000, which that still feels high to me, but I think, Chuck, we've talked about this, and that appears to be what it is. Yeah. The bigger cost factors are this entryway and the sprinkler system. Yeah, back here, or yeah. We would keep the second kitchen. I don't see us getting rid of it. It gets a lot of use. Could we consider upgrades in there as well? Yeah, we could. You know, you just spend some more money. There's really nothing to it. Probably the biggest upgrades in there would be switching over to gas ranges as opposed to our electric, and some convection ovens. I think those are the things I keep hearing people wish that we had: faster heating, better cooking equipment in there. Yeah. Larry?
Yeah, I was just thinking about the sprinkler situation. If you're expanding or changing the rooms over here on the east side of the stage, does it make any sense to do the whole sprinkler system without moving the walls back? I mean, does it affect you later on if you want to take the walls, move the walls back? Or can they put it in up above so it's just not functional at that point?
Well, either they can put it in. I think they would have to stub things out at this point, because once you start pushing all this wall back, I don't think we can even pre-plumb that. There's a lot of structural stuff that's going to happen up here. There's some major engineering. The architects seem to be really concerned about the building not falling over, and we felt that was probably good to address. So there would be some engineering that has to be dealt with on that front. But once you get, you know, the big feed line in, you get all of your basic plumbing in, adding to it is not near as big a deal as, yeah.
Can you take the sound area and put on a second floor?
That's one of the things we're thinking about, is kind of up and out. Right now there is a storage area out there, and you could build on top of that. Again, making sure we don't let the building fall down in the process. But we think we could do that. Our first step is to buy this iPad controller and just try it. We don't have to move anything. We can try the iPad for, you know, $1,000 or $2 and try that out. And if it works, then okay, we can think about moving. If it doesn't work, we haven't spent a lot of money to figure it out.
Tim, keep in mind, do you know where your increase in attendance comes from? Sometimes, if you have the best show in town, people come from other churches. I know I came from another church for different reasons. Just keep that in mind. You may not always have the best show in town. You end up with the biggest building, could have a Joel Osteen kind of thing, and all of a sudden, the show leaves, and you can't control that.
And exactly right. It's one of the reasons that I am not in favor of doing a big building program. Things change, you know, and this morning this room went okay. Next week it may be a bomb. So I'm constantly aware that those things affect people. And again, I'm not interested in spending a lot of money for us just to accommodate spectators. You know, at the same time, I don't want to see us stagnate because we're just not going to do anything more, anything different. So how do we find that middle ground?
So the chapel question really needs to reflect, where do the high schoolers go? Because we can't forget about them. If we build that storage, is that enough to empty one of the portables for the high schoolers?
Well, if we build the storage, we would plan to get rid of the portable. You know, Piper, we'll get in this, if we go this direction, this is a conversation we have to have. Would we only use the overflow during one service, not the other, and have the high school use it then? Can we have the high school move back into the fireside room? But if you do that, what happens to junior high? That's not without some issues that we have to figure out. But I think we can figure those things out without a major building program.
The sprinkler system, the water source from that, are we on city water, or do we have to tap another well to supply the sprinkler system?
Yeah, we belong to the Dungeness Heights Water Company, and so they provide everything around here. We've been checked for the fire flow. That was one of the issues we had to work through, is do we have enough water feed here? They want to know that we can fully sprinkle the building for 20 minutes until fire engines arrive, and so you've got to demonstrate you've got enough capacity in their reservoir and enough pressure coming through the line to do that. And the answer we've got is that, yeah, we can do that. Yeah, Dennis?
Maybe this is sticky, but if that thing
It's a mess. Yeah. Yep. It's true of any building that has automatic sprinklers in it. There's always like, what happens if it goes off when it's not supposed to? I believe that insurance policies normally do cover that kind of thing. Part of your fire policy and flood damage, that sort of thing, it does cover an accidental discharge of your sprinkler system.
I don't want to be a total Debbie Downer, but as far as the entryway, I am really concerned about the parking because we're on a busy street and there's only one entry, and I'm just concerned that that should be addressed before something happens that makes it important.
You're talking about the entryway out to the road out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just having only one entryway and the masses of people that are moving, I'm thinking about the community as well. Just, you know, the parking and the traffic.
Yeah,
problem.
Fortunately, it's only an issue during 2 very limited windows once a week. It's that end of service, it's end of the service, not even beginning of the service, because everyone trickles in over about a 30-minute period. But it's when we go to leave, that's when you see, you know, gentlemen, start your engines, and you know, we all head out there. The county, we talked to them about this, and one of the things we had wondered was if they were going to require us to put a turn lane in out there. And you're talking big money if you got to do any kind of modifications to the road. The county's looked at it and they've said, no, they're not going to require us to make any modifications to the road, which is great. Now, if we were to try and knock another exit out, like somewhere over here, traffic flow becomes an issue because none of our natural traffic flow would take people around the corner of this building out that way. The most natural traffic flow does flow to the main entrance out there. Would we ever want to put a traffic control person out there? That would be a possibility. But at present, it doesn't look like we'd make any dramatic changes to the road entry out there. I don't think we have a question on there specifically about, oh, we do ask if you attend first or second service. That is on the survey to kind of figure out, you know, where most people answering are coming. What service are you attending? Yeah, and the form also has a comment section because you may think of some great idea that we haven't thought of. You know, we're open. And so by all means, if you've got some other ideas, there's a comment section, pass them along. We have not made the plan yet. We just wanted to get the information in front of you to know how we're thinking, but we realize that we're reaching a point where if we're going to do something, we need to get rolling on it. It's the time is now if we're going to make any changes. Don't know that yet. It could go with both. It could go with one. The survey hopefully will help us figure some of that out.
If we go with the approximately $400,000, would that be using some of that slush fund, borrowing some, hoping that people would donate toward that the way we did for Boost?
The answer is yes. We would look at using some slush fund money. We would certainly, if we settle on the course, then we're going to put it out to the church family and say, here's what we need to raise. What are you willing to give? But we'll put that out there and see what people are willing to do, and then that will tell us, you know, is it paid for? Are we short? If we're short, then what do we have to do to get the rest of the way? So I think what I'd like to do at this point, we're going to wrap up here, but I would like to have us just spend some time praying together. And what I'd like to do is, rather than just one or two people being the mouthpiece for the group, why don't you just, where you're sitting in groups of 2, 3, 4, just get together and let's just pray a bit that God would give us wisdom and direction about what we should do. You've kind of heard the options, you've heard our thoughts on it, and what does God want us to do, how to move forward. And I'd say once we are done with that, when your group is done praying, you're free to go. There are those surveys. If you can't do it online, pick one up from Jeff, and we'd like to have those back to us within 2 weeks. And I will be sending out an email that will have a link to the survey, and if you can do that online, that just makes life for Katie and Jane a lot easier in the office, okay? So why don't you go ahead and break up and let's spend some time praying.